the cobwebs get kind of cleared out by the cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid is only released in the sleeping brain.
You're listening to an Apex Mindset episode of the RCN podcast, where we learn from inspiring individuals who push the boundaries to reach extreme levels of success. Apex Mindset. Elevate your life. In this episode of Apex Mindset, CEO, keynote speaker, resilience, and mental health trainer, Rachel Druckenmiller.
So you don't control the first thought, but you can then control the second thought. So the second thought then is what you do is you demonstrate self-compassion and a plan of action. So self-compassion looks like, yes, this is very hard right now, and I don't like what's happening. Like, just to say that. Most people have not given themselves permission to say that and then say, okay, so what am I going to do about it? So the door that opened was a totally new focus in my work and a level and an ability to connect with people in such a deep and real way, because I was finally really, really honest about my own struggles and my own experiences.
Welcome to the Apex Mindset podcast. Today, we're excited to have Rachel with us. Rachel, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I think we're going to dig in. Let's start by just introducing you to our audience. For those who don't know you, maybe back with a little bit of your background, where you grew up and where you're from, and then we could get into the industry you're in.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, an East Coaster, and so I still live here today. And my background is in, I think one thing important to mention, my background is that both my parents are entrepreneurs. So I kind of had this in my DNA to kind of create something, of my own at some point. I was kind of brought up that way. And they were both teachers actually too. So there's this thing in me as well that just loves to teach naturally. So my background aside from that is in, psychology, and I spent 13 years in corporate working for a benefits consulting firm in the well-being industry. So kind of the bread and butter of the work that I do is in well-being, is in resilience. And I started speaking, really the first time I spoke was probably about 11 years ago. And then it's really become a core part of what I do over the past, I'd say 5 or 6 years. Now that's what I do full time. So I launched my company Unmuted back in September of 2019. And so I specifically work on helping leaders to live and lead more intentionally so that they can be more effective and connected and thrive at work and at home.
That's awesome. So you launched just in time to prepare to stay home and help, leaders learn how to lead and become, what a time to launch a business, right? How's that been for you?
Yeah, well, I was really excited. I kind of just, I didn't really give myself a whole lot of a break from my last day at my former job to when I started. Mm-hmm. My first day of working, I decided to have a photo shoot for my website. So I was like, well, I'm my own boss. That's what I want to do.
There you go.
And I had a really great fall. Really great first 6 months of business, doing keynotes, and was traveling all over the country, doing retreats and workshops, and really, really feeling really good about it. And I, as of, February, had a lot of my year mapped out, mm-hmm. and felt good about that too. And I was like, man, this is an awesome first year of business,
Yeah.
And then this thing called the coronavirus came along in March and decided to shut down the world. So with that, along with, thousands of other speakers, my whole business model
yeah,
kind of turned on its head as all of my events prior to that point were live speaking engagements.
Yeah. So how have you been able to shift, or what have you done to, take that from 100% of your work really being physical in gathered places with tons of people in public, that now that's not an option? How have you shifted to make some of this virtual? How's that been perceived or taken by your audiences or your potential clients and things?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first 2 weeks I was just kind of sad. I think a lot of times when it comes to business, we especially the entrepreneurs, it's like, suck it up, just like push through. You've got this, hustle, hustle, hustle. And there's like no room for grieving.
Yeah.
And that's a natural part of like any type of loss, is we have to give ourselves the space to like actually feel what it is we're feeling. And so I cried a lot the first 2 weeks that everything started to shift, because I was mourning when I thought was going to be this really incredible, second and third quarter of the year, frankly. I love to travel. I'm an extrovert. I love to meet new people. And so I'd worked really hard to get a lot of those gigs. And so there was a moment that happened that was like this pivot point for me. It was the week of St. Patrick's Day, which is, I think, when most things have really started to shut down. And I got a message on LinkedIn from a client that I did some work with 3 years ago. So I did a live session for them on beating burnout. And they reached out to me out of the blue and said, we need your help. Our people are really struggling. And, do you do any types of virtual training around emotional and physical well-being? And like through tears, I'm looking at this message and I'm like, as an entrepreneur, you're constantly in a mode of having to think on your feet and having to pivot and be agile. Yeah. And I wrote back and, it's like ready, fire, aim. Right. And I was like, yep, I can do that. I do virtual trainings. Let's get on the phone.
Yeah. That's how you do it, right? You say yes and figure out how to help them. And it's something so many businesses, I think, need, and some of them don't even know who to find, how to approach something like this. And so I think that's part of our focus today with you and your focus and your background. And it's May, it's Mental Health Month. Getting into just talking about how what's going on around us is affecting people, maybe some thoughts and strategies that people can use during this downtime. Where would you like to start?
I think a lot of it's funny. When I had that conversation with that client, what I did kind of in the moment was I thought about, okay, what am I experiencing right now? And what am I getting this sense just from the global community that people, on LinkedIn or in conversations I was having, what are the shared experiences that people are having in the midst of this kind of collective trauma? And so I realized, well, it's got to start with this mindset piece, which is obviously what this is all about, right? So how do we reset our mindset? So that was starting with the mind. And then I said, okay, beyond that, we then need to focus on the body, because so much of my work, my background as a health coach, I have a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in health science. So I've really taken this holistic look and said, all right, we need to focus on the body itself. And then let's focus on connection and relationships, because this phrase social distancing has been one of the biggest misnomers of what's going on right now, because it's really physical distancing. It's not, we're socially connecting. We've never physically met. Yeah. We're still socially connecting.
Yep. I saw someone post that on LinkedIn a few weeks back, and it was one I took and shared, was like, don't keep calling it social distancing, call it physical distancing, because we definitely don't want to be shutting off social interaction. And that's something that needs to be encouraged, and finding ways to get people to connect, even if it's not physically.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, for me, when I started with that, so I mapped out, I was like, all right, I'm going to do a 3-part training, and it's going to be on mindset, self-care, and connection. And so now I've, delivered either parts of that or the full thing to, at this point, it's reached several thousand people. And I've gotten really fantastic feedback that for so much of it, the mindset piece is people just want permission to know that how they feel is normal and that they're not alone.
Yeah.
So it's normal to be grieving. It's normal to feel a sense of loss. It's normal to be angry. It's normal to be sad. It's normal to be irritable. It's normal that you are crying for no apparent reason and you just can't name what's triggering it. It's because we're all experiencing this. So I think normalizing it and saying the reason why this feels so heavy is because it is an experience of collective grief and trauma. And so we're going through those stages of grieving.
Yeah.
And it's not linear. So you might think one day you're like, oh my gosh, all right, I'm feeling really good today. Things are good. And then something happens and you get triggered and you go back to where you were 3 weeks ago. So people just wanted that to be normalized, and from a mindset perspective, that it's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to be sad. And, so from a mindset piece, I think what's been really helpful is, first of all, looking at that, and then looking at, okay, how do we shift our focus? Because the reality is this is hard and heavy, but we can choose where to place our energy and where to put our focus on a daily basis. So for instance, if the first thing you do at the start of the day is look at the death count for coronavirus, like that's going to affect the rest of your day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you need to know that, right? Most people don't need to know that. So I would encourage people to be selective sifters. So basically to not expose themselves to the news and media more than you absolutely have to.
Yeah. And I think different people have to also analyze and know themselves. Some people can handle getting on and looking at things like that, and it doesn't completely affect the rest of their day and their mindset and their like you said, being selective in what information are you going out and seeking. If you're going to watch the news, who are you listening to, how much of it, and then dedicating some of your time to other focuses internally, things you can control versus things you can't control, things are true versus, as much as we don't want to say it, there's a lot of things in the media that you're like, okay, is this channel making this stat up, or where is it coming from? There's so much fake news out there about, I don't know how deep we'll dig into politics and all that fun stuff, but you'll hear so many variety of things, like the death count is way lower than it actually says it is, or the opposite, it's 10 times more, or that hospitals are getting paid to label things as coronavirus. There's so much news out there. It's like, okay, why don't we filter this? Let's rewind back and focus on things we can control internally, your own mindset, and then starting to expand that from there. Your own house, how are people around you doing? Your family, your friends, your coworkers. That's a good point.
Yeah. So exactly what you said is focusing on what we can control, because anxiety comes from uncertainty. And so there's so much uncertainty right now that people are spinning out with anxiety, right? Your point about the news, right? They sensationalize everything. So they're there to get you to keep watching. So they're not just going to tell you something that feels emotionally neutral. That's not why they exist. They exist to trigger you. So, I think a lot of it is recognizing that. And so as we start to shift our focus and say, look, I'm not just going to talk about everything that's negative. I'm not just going to dwell on my fears. I'm going to allow myself to feel them, but then I'm going to say, okay, now what? So one of the things I started doing about 6 weeks ago was keeping track in my journal of what I call bright spots. And so on a daily basis, I would make a list from 1 to 10. One of my coaches, Delatora McNeil, said that the mind will expand to fill the space you give it. So if you tell your brain there were 10 good things that happened today, then it's like your brain gets creative and starts to look for those things. And because it became a routine and something I was doing consistently, what happened is my focus naturally shifted. I had this attunement for noticing good things. And because I had this attunement, when a good thing happened that previously I might have just been like, oh, that's something insignificant, I captured it. I sort of took this mental snapshot of that thing that happened, because I knew I was going to be accountable to myself at the end of the day to write down 10 bright spots, 10 wins, or 10 good things that happened. So, that really helped a lot. And I know I get, evaluations after I do these sessions from people. And that's one of the things that people connect to the most of how, let me do this with my kids. We're sitting around the table at night. What was a bright spot from today? With your partner, with a friend, with a coworker at the start of a meeting. Just to get people to start focusing on what is good. Yeah. So that, I think, from a mindset perspective, has been really helpful. And another thing I just want to mention that may be helpful for people listening, it's a really, really great kind of I don't call it a mindset hack, but it's something that you can use from cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's called a thought chart. So when you have an experience that you get triggered by something, let's say people in the midst of what's going on, they see something on the news and it makes them freak out, or they look at all they have to do for work and they just feel overwhelmed by everything. So that's the trigger, right? And then they have an automatic thought, and our automatic thought is oh my gosh, I can't take anymore. There's been so much change so quickly. I feel like I'm failing at everything. I'm falling apart. I'm dropping the ball. I'm going to lose it. Right? But we don't want to admit those things because then we think people will judge us, but that's what's going on in our head. I think what's really helpful from like a self-compassion standpoint is to recognize you don't control that first thought. So you don't control the first thought, but you can then control the second thought. So the second thought then is what you do is you demonstrate self-compassion and a plan of action. So self-compassion looks like, yes, this is very hard right now, and I don't like what's happening.
Yeah.
Like just to say that. Most people have not given themselves permission to say that, and then say, okay, so what am I going to do about it? So when I spin out, I have a list of 5 people. I'm going to reach out to one of those people through a text or a phone call, talk to them for 10 minutes. I know I'll be in a better headspace once I talk to that person.
Yeah.
So that's, just some examples of things from a mindset perspective, and just acknowledging the last thing on mindset I'll say is to acknowledge, I'm doing the best I can with what I have in this moment. And that's all I can expect of anyone, including me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so true. And I think, like mentioned earlier too, everybody has different strengths and different weaknesses. Some people, I think, get stuck in step 1. They get the bad experiences from the news or things that bring them down, and then they find they're just kind of stuck, and they lack the ability, or they think they lack the ability to pull themselves out of it. What's some, for people kind of with that stage that really find a hard time getting back to the positive, what do you think, what can they do?
So one of the things I encourage people to do, and this is evidence-based, I like everything I do, it's sort of like viewed as the soft stuff.
Sure.
It's the science. For whatever reason, social sciences are viewed as softer, but there's so much backing behind it. There's an activity called when one door closes, another opens. And so what you do is you think about a situation in your life before where there was something negative that happened. You had a bad experience, let's say. So for me, I might say, okay, 3 years ago, I just pushed myself so hard my whole life that I burned out and got mono, right? I got Epstein-Barr virus. And I lost my voice, and I couldn't be around people. I had no energy for like 6 months. I had to cut back on my work. Like all these things got kind of unraveled. And in the midst of that experience, what I learned, like the great gift that came out of that, was I learned the hard way that I couldn't keep pretending like I had it all together all the time, and that nobody else was expecting me to always have all the answers and always know everything and always be on top of everything and always be happy. Like that wasn't what people expected of me. That was what I put on myself. And so in that experience, as I was recovering, I learned the power of leaning on other people and receiving help without apologizing for it or feeling guilty. And I learned to open up and be vulnerable to people in a way that I had not before, because I was so afraid that they would view me as incompetent if I showed that I wasn't the picture perfect image of what wellness was.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that experience, right, that was a door closing. That was a very painful and difficult experience. But the door that opened was a richness of my friendships and a focus on relationships and a focus on being freer. For me, part of being unmuted is using your voice to speak up and to speak out about things that you're feeling. It's about expression, part of it. And so many of us silence ourselves. And so that experience then led to the door opening of, okay, I then became someone who was chronicling my journey of burnout. And I started to teach people what I was learning and what I was reading and studying about how we can prevent burnout. So the door that opened was a totally new focus in my work and a level and an ability to connect with people in such a deep and real way, because I was finally really, really honest about my own struggles and my own experiences.
Yeah.
And so because I have that perspective of, okay, a really, really, really bad part of my life, I could label it bad, right? Difficult, painful, led to something really positive. And so with that mindset, then every single person listening has been through something difficult, because that's a human experience. We go through difficult things. No one gets out of this place unscathed, right? So to think about a time where you got through something that seemed really difficult or was really difficult, and what was an unexpected positive outcome that came from that. Yeah. And write about that. Write about those things. Write about that experience. Give yourself perspective. Remember when you bounced back from that thing. Remember when that thing felt so heavy and you were able to rise above it. So it's almost like this like inner, kind of like this inner cheerleader for ourselves to be like, remember when you did this, you can do this.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking back at past times and seeing historically that, even though you're going through something difficult, there can be positive from it. And I think then, like you're saying, even when you start to make something a habit, you can start to realize anytime you go through something negative, anytime there's a difficult situation, something can come, that will be a positive light from it. So now you can start in your mind going, okay, I know this is difficult now, but since I know historically something good can come from it, what in this situation can I shift to think about that? I proactively know it's going to be good, and I can start to maybe even get to that point faster and not keep myself locked down with just this difficult mind, knowing that what I go through right now is the most difficult thing I've ever been in, or let it pull you down emotionally too far. Yes, you're going to go through it. Yes, you're going to struggle, and it may be difficult, but knowing that you can help someone else through the difficulty you're going through, you can share your story with other people. I think turning that into a habit, so you proactively know something good's going to come out of this difficult time.
Yeah, I think it's really tied to what I talk about it as our human beings are meaning-making machines. So we want to make meaning of things, and we really want to make meaning of difficult things because our rational mind can't fully grasp, for instance, what's going on right now. Our like the fact that everything in our lives has been upended.
Yeah.
Our rational mind can't deal with that. So what we often try to do is dismiss it or diminish it or pretend like we're fine when we're not. And so I think that's why it's so important, as that the first step is feel your feelings, which is something I did not do for a lot of my life. If I felt sad or angry, that got stuffed so far down because the good girl is not allowed, the good girl who gets straight A's and does everything everyone expects, which was kind of my persona much of my life. That person's not allowed to be sad or angry. And so I did a really good job of stifling sadness and anger.
Yeah.
And as an adult, it is so freeing. When I'm sad, like Saturday, and I shared this before we started, the podcast, but I was involved in a car accident 3 weeks ago, and have a fracture in my spine as a result of that. And, I cried every single day.
Yeah.
The first 2 weeks. And I thought I was like, I think I'm doing better. And then Saturday morning of this weekend, I was just flooded with the realization that as the weather's getting nicer, I see people out running, and I'm like, I'm not going to be able to do that until like maybe August at the earliest. And just the grief came back, and I let myself feel it. And I reached out. And the thing that's different, and the thing I would encourage people to do who are feeling like they're struggling, one of the ways we silence ourselves is that we make our world really small and we withdraw from people. We self-isolate.
Mm-hmm.
And so what the hardest, but perhaps most courageous thing we can do in those moments is to reach out to somebody in that vulnerability.
Yeah.
And say, hey, somebody we trust, even if it's one person, and say, I'm having a rough day. Do you have any time to talk sometime today or tomorrow?
Yeah.
I've got some stuff in my head that I'm not really, that's really difficult for me right now. I just need to process it with somebody. Can we talk it out?
Mm-hmm.
And it's scary if you're not used to that. In our culture, particularly, I think women are more allowed to do that than men are, which I think is unfortunate, because everybody has feelings.
Yep.
And everybody has all the feelings. It's just that we're sometimes culturally allowed or not allowed to feel certain ones.
Yep.
And so I think that's part of it, is that for me, that the biggest part of getting unmuted for me was to reach out to people. It was to open up. It was to have that to say, I need something. I hated to feel like I needed people. I wanted to believe that I was independent. I could handle it all by myself, and that I didn't need help. That I was just this superwoman,
Yeah.
And those experiences and what's going on right now have taught me that that's not a healthy or fulfilling way to live.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, I think that's probably one of the most difficult steps for most people. Self-isolation when you're going through difficult time is so easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
You're especially stuck at home, you're in pajamas, you're on the couch, you're not going somewhere, you're not seeing people, you don't want to call and tell them you're having a hard time. You put it all on yourself. I think that first step of, and again, this is something where you start making this a habit. Like, talk with some close friends or family or people that's like, hey, I haven't been doing this, but can I start, reaching out when I'm having a hard time and just talk? I doubt the answer is going to be, well, no. People are afraid to do it, but then they're, I think, surprised by the response. Of course, let's chat. Let's get coffee and stand 8 feet apart and be in our trunk in the parking lot. Right? Everybody's doing that thing right now. People want to interact with people. They don't want to just sit at home and see a TV of fake people, and they don't want to just watch, videos of people talking on YouTube. People really want personal interaction. So by taking that step, I think you're really helping both parties.
Yeah. Well, and there's another thing I read, I forget what book it was in, that people who survive stress the best are the people who increase their social investments in the middle of stress.
Yeah.
That those are the people that survive the best. And so I'm like, man, good thing I had a primer 3 years ago, because when you have to figure out how to reinvent an entire business model, but you've only been in business 7 months.
Yeah.
And you get hit by a car and you have to then figure out how to practically get, fortunately my husband's super supportive and he's a teacher, so he's able to be home with me. But just letting people help you. I think we have such a pride block to that. I don't know if it's societally, global. I don't really know exactly what it is, but it's certainly right. This idea of like, we want to be able to do things ourselves. And when somebody offers to help and support you, like to just accept that you're worthy of that and to not push it away or excuse it. Like I had a woman reach out. I'd never met this person before. We were serving on a virtual panel together, like a week later or 2 weeks later. And she reached out when she saw what happened with the accident. And she said, oh my gosh, can I set up a meal train for you and your husband? She's like, I've done this for maybe 3 or 4 friends. And so my initial reaction was like, Rachel, you have the means. It's okay. Your husband can handle it. He's used to making all the meals anyway. But we hyper rationalize when someone wants to help us, right? And say why we don't need it.
Yeah.
And like shortly after that, I was like, absolutely not, Rachel. You just yesterday were in the hospital for 8 hours and somebody wants to help you. You saying yes to that. And I did. And we had a call that night and she took 40 minutes and went through the website and set up everything. And so for this whole month, we've had not really think about meals. Yeah. And it's been awesome. Such a gift because we received it. So it's like we have to be willing to not only ask for it, but also to be willing to receive it without apologizing.
Yeah. And one thing on that is, there's a lot of people who are in a good place and their greatest joy and something they love to do is bless other people who need the help, whether it is through just connection, whether it's financially, whether it's meals. We're about to have another baby next month. We see the same thing every time it comes around, somebody wants to help. And a lot of times even my wife, it's like, there is that sense of like, we're in a good spot, but over time, from baby 1 to baby 4, we have very much gone to the help is welcome. That letting people help you, lightening your load, because, then it even comes down to the weight that you have mentally, having a 4th baby come, having all the kids to take care of, having work to do, having, it's helpful, whether it's a need or not. If people want to do it, it's something that really does help you, and anything you can do to help each other. I think that's another big thing is people want a sense of community when they find, whether it's friends, they've moved to a new place. And a lot of people don't have good family relationships. So even when you start connecting with people that are new in your life, there's a lot of times when you open up, you'll find that either you or they really needed that relationship. And they start to feel that sense of community, and it becomes a positive thing for everybody. Yeah,
no, I totally agree. And what you said is that the people, they want to do, like, people feel so helpless right now. Like, generally speaking, people feel really helpless, right? They're like, I can't do a lot of the things I would normally do. And so if somebody wants to do that, like, I've had people offer to bring us 2 meals, and ordinarily I'd be like, they already brought us one. And like,
Yeah.
really, that's asking a lot. And now I'm just like, nope, bring it on. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
So liberating. And it strengthens connection. When we let people help us, it actually strengthens the connection, because there's this sense of, of this sense of sacrifice, or this sense of caring and love that's behind it, a sense of service. And I was listening to a podcast with Vivek Murthy, who was the former U.S. Surgeon General. And one of the things that he was saying is that service is the antidote to loneliness. So when we serve people, when we help somebody else, and sometimes the word help can feel like victimizing for people. So, okay, use the word serve, or use the word care or love instead. But just that idea of when we serve another person, it's making us come out of our little hole where we have this tunnel vision about the world. And we're saying, oh my gosh, there's a need here, and I can control something. I can control my response to that need. So it's a reminder, to your point about control, it's a reminder of what we can control again, which puts us in a better spot mentally. So it's all connected. Yeah,
man, these are good points. What's, do you have any other, I know you're talking quite a bit, especially in May, Mental Health Month. Are there any other topics that you're engaging on right now, in your other discussions that maybe we would want to touch on?
I think a lot of the part of what contributes to mental health a lot that I don't think people talk about nearly enough is the importance of sleep. So like really big. Sleep, is that something that's a struggle or a challenge?
Yeah, well, struggle, challenge, or choice. I don't know. I would say I don't get enough.
Okay. So you're not alone. Most people, we are very, as a country, very sleep deprived. And I learned about the importance of sleep from burnout, and I ended up sleeping about an hour more a night after having that happen. Because I started to research sleep, and I wanted to learn more about sleep. And then I started teaching workshops on sleep. So I was like, oh my gosh, people need to know this stuff.
Yeah.
So for instance, when we are sleep deprived, we are less accurate at interpreting other people's facial expressions. So a sleep deprived brain typically has the amygdala, which is that kind of alert system. We're on higher alert when we're sleep deprived. So you might look at me a certain way, right? And if I'm sleep deprived, I interpret that as hostile.
Okay.
If I'm well rested, I might think nothing of it because you actually didn't mean anything by it. I was just assigning meaning to it because I was unheightened.
Interesting.
State of emotion. So, we don't think as rationally. We're more irritable. We're more reactive instead of responsive. And everyone's dealing with that right now. Anyway, it's like that is already hypercharged because of the current environment. So like, what can we do to sort of dissipate that? Like my husband and I have been binge watching the entire series of Parks and Rec.
Yep.
And at a certain point, typically around like 11 o'clock each night, we turn the TV off, right? Like you could watch 6 more episodes and stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning. But as far as I know, Netflix is not going anywhere.
Yes.
And so part of it is to acknowledge, all right, turn it off, turn it off and give yourself that space to get to sleep, because sleep repairs so many things in our body. It repairs the dings in our muscles and our tissues. Sleep, there's a fluid released in your brain called cerebrospinal fluid that gets released in your brain, and basically imagine that it clears out the cobwebs. So over the course of the day, you have these experiences. You have some of these cobwebs that are like very kind of fragile, that you don't need to have those thoughts or experiences carried over into the future. And in other experiences, we want to remember them. And so sleep takes these memories from short-term memory and stores them in long-term memory, which is what we need for learning and growth and development. But the cobwebs get kind of cleared out by the cerebrospinal fluid, and that fluid is only released in the sleeping brain. So if someone is sleep deprived, they're going to have challenges with memory, with focus, with concentration.
Yeah. I definitely can relate with some of that.
Well, especially having 3 kids and one on the way. I mean, that's
sure. Yep. No. I know one day the sleep deprivation will slow down, but Yeah, that's all, man, those are all really good points. Talking about that, do you think that, and maybe you could share you personally and or just even in your studies and things you're talking about, do you think that having a set routine is something that's important for your day? Yeah, what do you think about routines?
Yeah. So all of our routines, for most people, people's routines, like, oh, I take my kid to school and I leave them there and then I go to work, right? Now it's like, nope, they're all one and the same. Not for everyone, for a lot
Yeah.
of people, right? It's like you are now all in one ecosystem all day, every day with very little break.
Mm-hmm.
And so because so many of our normal routines have been disrupted, that again really throws us off. It throws off like the body loves consistency. The body operates in rhythms, right? Circadian rhythm, which is, connected to your sleep and stuff. And so when everything gets thrown off, those rhythms get disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's why, again, people end up in this state where emotionally they're all over the place. So a routine is really helpful. Again, one of the things I would encourage people to do first thing in the morning is to not have the first thing you do be look at the news or jump on social media right away.
Mm-hmm.
Because if your first thoughts of the day are somebody else's thoughts,
yeah,
it's gonna throw you off. So whether that's you create time to like actually sit down at a table and have breakfast, whether you reach out and talk to a friend, whether you journal, listen to a podcast, read a chapter of a book, do something, right? I put a video on LinkedIn Monday through Friday. So like my routine, and I've, aside from maybe a couple days since the accident, I'm still doing that because for me, that's a way that I can make meaning of what's happening and share that with other people. So for me, that feels very purposeful. So yeah, absolutely keeping a sense of routine to the extent you can, like allowing, again, the reminder of I'm doing the best I can with what I have in this moment. That kind of gives you that grace and that space to say, I'm going to have a routine and it's probably going to be interrupted.
Yeah. Yeah.
But just the mentality of trying to create one and like the bright spots, that was a routine. Mm-hmm. Getting to sleep by a certain time, that's a routine.
Yeah.
Getting dressed. So a lot of people, when I get on Zoom calls, they'll be like, oh, wow, you look so nice. And I'm like, look, I'm already in a mode where my body's like not at 100%. So when we dress for the way we want to feel, as opposed to just the moment, like, again, most people are, party on the top, pajamas on the bottom, which is fine. Right. And I'm not wearing like dress pants when I'm having Zoom calls.
Yeah, sure.
But a little effort can be helpful. Again, not to put more pressure on people, but when you normalize that, because you would normally get ready for work and like look like you didn't fall out of bed.
Yeah.
And so as much as that might feel like it's another thing I have to do, it can actually help you feel more normal because that's what you used to do.
Yeah. That's something my wife does. When I stay home, I'm like sweatpants, I'm like, I don't want to go get dressed if we're just staying home. But, she's done that. And she's like, when you get up and get ready, whether you're going anywhere or not, like you feel better. It puts your mind in that state of like, I'm ready to go. Like I can be active. I feel better. I feel ready. I feel clean. I feel fresh. And I've noticed it as well, as much as I like to just get up and have coffee, stay in pajamas, if I'm not going anywhere. Just something simple like that, it really does make a difference.
Yeah, it does. And you asked about a couple other things relating to mental health too. I want to mention just two more things that might be helpful.
Yeah, great.
One is movement. We've all heard this, the importance of getting outside. Like before the accident, my husband and I would go for a walk every night for like a half hour. And it was not only a time for us to connect like relationally and socially, but to be able to be outside, to see it was a chance to see other people from a very far away distance, but to still feel like you were interacting with humanity besides a computer screen. And so the movement piece is really helpful. Getting outside is good for your mental health. And it's one of the ways that we help our body release the cortisol and adrenaline that's filling up in us so much, right? So those hormones that are associated with like taking action and responding to stress, many people now have an influx of those hormones in their body because of what's going on right now. Mm-hmm. And so when you exercise, you help your body essentially like eat up those hormones and kind of get them out of your system. So movement, if you don't like moving for the sake of moving, movement is really good for your brain and for your emotional and mental health. So And walking's fine. Like, you don't have to, like, I know there's pressure right now, especially in the entrepreneur space, of like, you should have like the next great American novel at the end of coronavirus. Yeah. And that is so unhelpful.
Yeah.
Like, it's so unhelpful, you know, like, now's the time to launch all your stuff. Now's the time to do this. And people are like, I'm just mentally trying to survive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, give yourself a break about that. And then find something in each day that makes you laugh and brings you joy. Because that is a really great way to get yourself in a better headspace, and laughter releases tension in the body. So if you have a really good laugh, like think about somebody who really, really makes you laugh. Mm-hmm. When you're laughing hard, like your body shakes. And when your body shakes, it helps you like release. It's like, imagine it's like massaging. Imagine just like massaging your own body when you're laughing. Yeah. You're releasing tension emotionally and physically. So I encourage people to find things, whether it's a comedian, or if you Google, if you search for laughing babies on YouTube.
Oh yeah.
Hours of entertainment.
That'll do it.
Yeah.
No, those are good points. In fact, I was gonna, when we were talking about routines, I was even gonna ask, what, fitness and being active, a lot of people strive for that. It's always the New Year's resolution. Mm-hmm. And then they don't do it. And what the importance was, in regard to that. So I appreciate you bringing it up as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think those are all, I think we've touched on a lot of great points regarding what's going on, things people can do. I think some of those are points I'm even going to take home, like the bright spots of the day. And I think those are all great. Being that we also, are trying to just share with people that are interested in starting businesses, people who are looking for change, people who feel like they're stuck in a career they don't like, or, and we talk with people that have done that, that have taken that step. What are some things that helped you when you decided to leave a career, leave a job, and you were comfortable? What are some things that let you take that next step?
It was kind of a series of things, these little catalysts, these signs along the way. I thought I was going to leave in 2013. I was like, I'm going to become a health coach. I'm going to master's degree. I'm going to become a health coach. I'm out of here, right? I'm going to open my own coaching practice. And then I realized I didn't really like doing one-on-one coaching as much as I like doing group speaking. That was 2013. So that was 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So part of it was I was like resisting myself. I was, at times I would be frustrated with myself. Like, why haven't you made a move yet? Like, now's the time. You're so frustrated. You got to do something about it, Rachel. And so a couple things that were really helpful for me that I think can be used by anyone. One is to get really clear on what your strengths are. So I'm an assessment junkie, and we had taken an assessment at work that anyone can access. And I can give you a link for this too. I have 4 of these assessments linked on my website.
Great.
One is called the Predictive Index, which looks at like behavioral drives and motivations. And we took this assessment in 2014, and I got my results back, and it gives you 2 charts. It gives you a chart of yourself and your self-concept. So the self is essentially how, like, the traits and the qualities that you bring to the table, right? How you see yourself. And the self-concept was like, how do you think other people expect you to behave in this role? And I got my results back, and those graphs were 2 different people.
Yeah.
And I had this moment of looking at it, and I was like, Rachel, this is why you feel so frustrated, because you're wired this way, and you're trying to conform to be wired this way so that you can be agreeable to people and do what people expect. But your whole, like, the thing about who you are is that you're not somebody who likes to conform just because other people expect you to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like, you feel like you're being a sellout, which is one of the reasons why this is so hard. And so, I went through that experience. I had this kind of this aha moment, this awakening, and I took little steps along the way. So I was basically functioning as an intrapreneur at my company.
Yep.
And I don't think a lot of people talk about that, but I basically had this entrepreneurial spirit of taking initiative on things, of finding ways to be useful based on the skill sets that I knew I had of essentially writing my own job description.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I worked for someone who gave me a lot of leeway. So to be fair, not everyone could have succeeded in that spot, because if you're with someone who keeps trying to tamp you down, that's not going to work.
Yep.
So fortunately, I was in a place where I was given a lot of leeway. I joke that I had a long leash. He jokes that he's like, you didn't have any leash.
Yeah.
So part of it was I would push the envelope, right? And then I started to think about, okay, what matters to leadership? I don't think people in the roles that they're in when they're trying to get out think about how to maximize that opportunity that they're already in, where they have a consistent and stable paycheck.
Yep.
So I said, all right, what am I going to do? I'm going to figure out what's important to them. And so they wanted to be recognized as, a top workplace, and culture was really important. And so I started putting initiatives in place and pitching things to help us stand out and to help us be viewed as a thought leader. And I started publishing thought leadership and articles and on webinars and getting us attention in that way. I started applying for awards. We started winning awards. And I recognized, all right, if I give them what they want, I have a better chance of getting what I want.
Yep.
Which is, again, I think people are just in this mode like, I'm not happy. It's like, well, are you meeting the needs of the people that are writing your paycheck?
Yep. Yep.
Because when you're not self-employed, that you have to care about that.
Yeah.
And so I did that for a while. And then I applied for awards and I got recognized. My kind of breakthrough moment was in 2015. I was named by this organization called the Wellness Council of America, which trains wellness leaders, wellness practitioners. And I was named their #1 health promotion professional in the United States in 2015. And that was my catalyst that gave me a platform that put me on the map in a way that I hadn't had a platform before. Yeah. So, so I really rode that out. And I was creating my own personal brand while I was still working for somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that ruffled feathers sometimes. I got sort of a little slap on the wrist sometimes for doing that. But I knew that I wasn't going to be there forever.
Yeah.
And I knew from an integrity standpoint that who I was the thing that people were coming to me for.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Like, we want you. It's incidental where you work. And that's what eventually led me to leave. Was that it's just like I was going to lose out on opportunities to do things that I really wanted to do because they might not have been a client or a good prospect for my employer, which totally is fair and makes sense. I got to the point where I had outgrown what I was able to get out of that role.
Yeah.
But I did pursue training. So I'd encourage people, look, training's expensive. Certifications are expensive. If you can get your current employer to cover trainings for things that are relevant to the business that you're in and relevant to your role, but you could also use when you leave, like, ask for that.
Yeah.
I did that. I asked for trainings. I asked to go to conferences. So by the time I left, I had this super rich network, right, of thousands of people that knew me, that knew my work, that I didn't really have to do much of any marketing.
Yeah.
I already had people that wanted to work with me when I left. Yeah. So, but that meant that there were times I was very frustrated when I was still there, but also very grateful that I had the space to have that safety net, financially and just relationally, that was a place where they gave me permission to meet all these people. And I'm still doing work with my former employer. It's like, we still have such a positive relationship that, like, with the parent company, I just, finished doing some work with them and some training for their leaders. And it just goes to show the power of relationships and the power of being true to yourself. So I would say, do what you can with where you are.
Yeah.
Have you maxed out? Have you maxed out that? Most people, I do not think, have maxed out.
Yeah. And I think you've made several points that, man, they resonate with me on my journey as well. And I think one thing maybe a little different, like, I didn't even ever start to build a personal brand specifically, or like, it was really, I gave 100% wherever I was. I didn't intentionally, like, try to build something up thinking I'd take it away with me. I always wanted to do the best I could wherever I was at. And And then you'd get to a point that it's like, okay, I see something further that I can't make happen here. Then I found a second company, you know, that would let me take it and now take it to another level and max it out even further. Always trying to just do the best I could there.
Yes.
While, you know, my role did require that I built a network. It did require that I'm doing business development, going to conferences. So by doing the best you can in your current role at your current company, you're building your career no matter what, whether you break off and become an entrepreneur or a business owner. And that's another thing, you know, it's that life is not meant for everybody. So I think so many people get stuck in a career or stuck not being able to even grow up a ladder because they stay reserved and they feel like they deserve something from that company more than a paycheck, or, you know, people think that they deserve a raise when they're also sometimes the employees, or people that are like, they only want to do the bare minimum. You know, they don't want to develop themselves better in a way that will help the company they're working at, or they don't want to give an extra hour unless, oh my gosh, is it definitely going to be paid in overtime? If not, I'm not help, you know.
Right.
I think when people realize that helping their company, helping their role is ultimately what helps them either grow to a bigger position, land a better job, or start something on their own. I think even just that one change of like, change your mindset to where you're always giving more, not leaving a bunch of extra room on the table, is probably the first step I think a lot of people could make.
I 110% agree with that. And also, to be clear, that, like, you know, there were opportunities to have integrity in that. So I had opportunities that came along where companies that were not clients of ours, that I could have easily just been like, I'm going to take 2 vacation days and I'm going to take this gig and get 100% of the money, because I know this came 100% as a result of my relationship. It was not an introduction from my company. But I was like, no, Rachel, you have integrity. So I did a keynote out in San Francisco. And then I would tell my company, hey, and we had an arrangement set up where I'd get a portion of that. But, you know, I was honest every single time those things happened. And for me, one of the final catalysts was I got to the point where I had an offer to do something in the fall of 2019 that I was not going to be able to do if I still worked where I worked. And I was already on the path. I was already thinking maybe January 1st of 2020 that I would, head out. And to be fair, they were very patient with me. You know, there were times I was sometimes like a bull in a china shop where I was like, oh, let's do this. And you know, I got a lot of grace. So I want to acknowledge that. But they knew. I mean, when I told our CEO the day that I told him I was leaving, he was like, I knew this was a matter of when and not if. Like, he knew how I was wired. So to your point, just like be really good and honest and have integrity and give your best of what you have where you are. And then that's going to, like, you know, that's a reflection of your character.
Well, and like your story of some of your journey and what let you start. I mean, by giving the best you could at your current role is what let that company get awards and you to be named a top, you know, if you didn't give your best, you wouldn't have gotten that, which would have made starting way harder, which wouldn't have given you the network and the, you know, so I think people, they don't realize that. They don't think about giving the best you can, having integrity, being honest, and seeing that if you do that and you're patient, you know, becoming a overnight success takes, 20 years, right? You know, if you give your best and you help wherever you're at, that is what could launch you to start another business. And again, not everybody even needs to go out and start a business. A lot of times you could just grow into a role that maybe you get brought in as a partner at a firm, or maybe you run a division at a big company that becomes way more rewarding than starting your own business, depending on what it would have been. So there's so many things. Again, I think it really just comes down to start giving more and do the best you can. And then you're gonna see your adventure, go from a stagnant to up in one direction or another.
Yeah. And the funny thing is I had two experiences that happened along the way that were sort of like some of those light bulb moments. I was meeting with a therapist and she had taken me through this assessment called the Harrison assessment. And I was, I did the survey and I saw her to get my results. And when I first came into the session, she goes, after seeing your results, I'm really trying to understand how you are possibly working for somebody else.
That's funny.
It's like the DNA was all like highly self-motivated, understands that like pay, like delayed gratification, like all these types of things. And she said, the thing that's holding you back is that your ability to detect risk is basically greater than your belief in yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
So my risk aversion of like, well, this could happen. This won't work. What if this doesn't?
Yep.
I was really good at that game, better than I was at trusting myself. But everything pointed to, including people in my, like people around me were like, why don't you just do your own thing? Like you could do that.
Yeah.
It was self-doubt. So part of it is that, and just, you have to be comfortable with risk. I mean, you have to be comfortable with, there's a global pandemic, your entire business like disappears in a week. And you have to not like sit down and wallow in that. You got to bounce back pretty quick and pivot and say, all right, now what am I going to do? And to get creative and to reach out to your network and to trust. And like, so it is, to your point, it is not for everyone. But one of the things my dad, who's been kind of like my Yoda, one of the things he said to me is like, Rachel, do you want to do what you want to do, when you want to do it, how you want to do it? And I was like, you don't want to be told what to do. And I was like, yes. He goes, that person doesn't work for someone else.
Yeah. Then there is no try, just do.
Right.
Yep.
I was like, okay, fine. So I felt convicted, and I went to a professional speaking training with a group called Heroic Public Speaking in November of 2018. And then I finished the training in May of 2019. And that experience, and I was preparing for my final talk. And I paid my way through that. It was the biggest investment I'd ever made, but it was a very catalytic for me because I was with this community of other speakers from around the world. Yeah. And I had this realization of like, you belong here and you can totally make this work.
Yeah.
And I was preparing for my final like speaker reel that I was recording a video for. And in the video, one of the lines I had said was like, I think it's, it's time to give yourself permission, to basically like, to stop holding back and to be all that you are, to like use your voice and like to get unmuted. And I was like, I can't stand on a stage and say those words if I haven't made this move.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be out of integrity with myself. I'm not going to believe myself if I say, oh, it's time to expand and give yourself permission to be seen and heard for all that you are. Yeah. Right. And so the weekend before I went and recorded that video was the day I told them I was leaving.
That's awesome.
And and it's been like, you're so scared. I was like, I was scared for 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I wasn't. And then I was like, I'm excited and I'm ready.
Yep.
That fear, it's an interpretation, right? The fear and excitement are on the same kind of continuum in terms of physiological how we respond. So I was like, no, I'm not afraid. I believe in myself and I trust myself now. And I believe that the work I'm doing is needed in this world and that I'm the one to deliver it. And let's go.
That's awesome.
Let's get unmuted, So I was like, that's what I did.
It seems like you're doing great and we enjoy following you on LinkedIn. At the end here, when we post these up, we'll include some links for everybody so they can find your website and connect with you. We'll encourage people that might be looking for some consulting. There's a lot of companies in our network that I think need help encouraging and finding ways for their employees to get through this mentally. I think a lot of the points we've talked about, I think a lot of people need to hear. So we appreciate you joining us today. Before we wrap up, are there any other points we missed you'd like to touch on, or did we get to them?
I guess the last thing I would say, and this is something that has become part of, my mantra for my life, is when someone comes to mind for you, which is bound to happen in this time where people have had so many things slow down. When someone comes to mind for you, don't hesitate, initiate, reach out to them in that moment. Like, you could be the lifeline. I've had many people do this in my seasons of difficulty and struggle. The people who just reached out and said, hey, just want you to know I'm thinking about you, not even aware what was going on in my life. We all have the opportunity to do that for somebody else. And so often we judge it because we think it's going to be uncomfortable, or like, I would never say that to that person. I don't have that kind of relationship. We judge it and rationalize it. But there's like a reason when someone comes into your mind to not question it, but to just take action, like immediate action, a text, a voice text, a phone call, LinkedIn message, an email, something that allows you to immediately act on that person coming into your mind. And just about every time I've had that experience, I've gotten a response of, oh my gosh, I really needed that today. Thank you so much. So I would encourage people, especially in this season, to just stop with that hesitation and just initiate and reach out to people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And especially right now, like you said, that would probably be the response from everybody every single time. Right. Everybody needs interaction right now. Everybody is struggling in one way or another, whether it's yesterday or tomorrow. Maybe they're okay today. I think the increased connection is important. Last note, actually, that was a great one. Thinking about everything that's going on in coronavirus and community and virtual engagement, what do you think might be a couple positive things coming out of the situation we're in?
I think there's a lot of positive things. I think people are reprioritizing their lives and recognizing that, for instance, people who traveled all the time realize, you know what? I could have that conversation in a 1-hour Zoom call instead of a 3-day trip away from my friends and family. I see that as being a huge win. As somebody who wants to have kids at some point in the near future, I was like, how am I going to do that if I'm in a plane all the time and if I have to be on a stage in another state in order to get paid? Yeah. And now I'm having this experience like so many other people are of, oh my gosh, I can generate revenue from my house.
Yeah.
So that I feel like we're going to have this. I think another good thing is just the collective power of humanity to rise up and support each other. There's so many beautiful stories of organizations, of leaders, of neighbors, of frontline workers, of people just doing something kind and thoughtful, spreading light, being light to other people right now. I think that is so amazing. And I think another good thing that's going to come out of this is perhaps our appreciation for the things we once took for granted.
Yep.
The ability to gather together, the ability to celebrate each other, to be outside. I mean, I see people moving. My neighbor, I've never seen him run in my life. I saw him running this morning and I was like, hey, like people are taking better care of their bodies. I think a lot of people are. And so I see all of those things as really, really, really positive, and just gratitude for the things that we do have in the midst of all the things that have sort of fallen apart. So
definitely. I think like you said, you've never seen him running. He's running, and that's the same for a lot of people. It was so easy prior to this to be stuck in, and yes, routines are great, but stuck in a routine of get up, go to work, don't see your family, come home, dinner, repeat. Whether it goes back to that or not, I think this extended time that nobody knew was coming, this extended time to think, to find hobbies, to connect with people you didn't have time to connect with, to find ways to do things virtually. I think it's going to create a rejuvenated experience for people, even when they get back to work of, hey, I got time to exercise. It's making me feel better. I'm going to exercise now. Or I started this hobby, or I spent time with these people. I think there's going to be a lot of positive that come, but hopefully at least everybody that has completely lost work will be able to return to, and we don't know when it'll be completely over or gone, but and if you are in one of those positions that you've lost work or things have not gone the way you had planned, continuing to be innovative and think, how can I shift to, like you, not go and do these in person, but is there a way to do it virtually? Can I change my service or my focus a little bit to help somebody else that maybe didn't need it before and now does? So thank you again for joining us today. I think this was a great message that needs to get out to everybody. And we look forward to staying in touch with you, and hopefully we'll see you one of these days, either in a virtual conference or we'll get together somewhere in person.
I would love that. That'd be awesome. Thanks so much. It's been a fun fun conversation of things that are really, I think, relevant right now. So thank you so much.
Very much so. Alrighty. Well, thank you again, and we'll talk to you again soon.